My dad had kept two tiny whiskey bottles in a cupboard for 43 years, the kind you would maybe get on an airplane. My uncle gave them to him the day I was born, and he saved them, moving them from house to house, waiting for a reason to be opened. Now, a year and a half ago, just as I turned 43, he pulled them out, poured us both a glass, and said, "Let's toast." And I said yes. Now, at this point, I hadn't actually had a drink since the summer of, I think, 2019, the summer I found out I was pregnant with my son. So it had been 5 years, approximately. And in that time, I don't even think I had one glass of alcohol that whole stretch. So this was a big deal. It was a dad and daughter thing, a small, warm moment. And 20 minutes later, I was on the couch, laying down, kind of off in a way I couldn't really understand. I was grumpy. All I wanted to do was sleep, but everyone around me was suddenly very annoying. And then not long after that, it hit me. I couldn't access my lifeline, my intuition. It was just gone. And I want to tell you what that was because I think some of you already know exactly what I'm talking about, but haven't maybe put it into words yet. You're listening to The Emotional Truth, somatic healing and nervous system regulation for the midlife woman who's done everything right and still feels stuck. I'm Leslie Turner, somatic practitioner and intuitive coach. I work in the body, and I have a pretty uncanny ability to see what's actually running underneath, the stuff that therapy touched but never quite moved. Because understanding why you do something and actually stopping it are two completely different things, and that's exactly where we work. We cover people-pleasing, mom burnout, perimenopause, relationships, money, and what it actually costs the woman who's always been the responsible one. Short episodes, real stories, specific enough to stop you in your tracks. Let's get into it. What happened in those 20 minutes wasn't small. This wasn't a work moment. It was my birthday. It was 3 days after Christmas, sitting with my dad. But that same intuition that I use every single day is how I relate to the world. It's the thing I rely on to sit across from a client and know where the tension actually lives in their body before they've told me. It's the thing that I built my seer method around. Reading what's happening underneath the words someone is speaking to me in the body in real time. And for the first time, I was watching that exact connection get cut off in myself. And it was gone for about 24 hours. Now, I wrote about this, I think, on Instagram at the time, that it was offline for a day over one drink. And then I didn't really think much more about it. I filed it under, well, that was weird and kind of interesting. And I went back to drinking water or a mocktail if I so choose. And I didn't really touch alcohol again until 3 weeks ago. Jarrett, my husband, and I went away for our anniversary. It was a really nice dinner, the first night away in a long time. I had a glass of red wine, one glass, and I enjoyed it. The taste, the moment, the company, the food, kind of all of it. But that night I slept really poorly. And the next morning I woke up kind of inside a version of myself I did not recognize. Now, I wasn't annoyed at this time or grumpy. I was insecure about the money we were spending on this little trip, about my body in a bathing suit because we were at a spa, about my relationship in general. And these were old things that I've sat with and moved through and processed, things I'd normally be grounded and steady about. Suddenly they felt heavy and enormous, like the floor I usually stood on had been pulled out from under me overnight. And I almost sabotaged the second day of our trip. Jer and I had to sit down and have a very real conversation mid-vacation about this mood that came out of nowhere. Now, my first instinct was to blame, obviously, the bad sleep, because it's the easiest explanation. But somewhere in that conversation, I stopped and thought, oh, wait a second. I had alcohol. Like I had to repeat it before it would actually sink in. So I looked into it because I wanted to know if I was being overly sensitive or slightly dramatic. And there is a biological piece, and it's real. Alcohol pumps up a brain chemical called GABA. You might have heard of it. It's your body's built-in kind of quiet down switch. And I know it well because I used to prescribe it in supplement form to my patients back when I was a naturopath. It's not that the switch itself is the problem. Your nervous system needs ways to downshift, but alcohol just happens to be the one most people will reach for without realizing what else it's doing at the same time. But GABA doesn't fully explain what happened to me. It explains if you had a mellow evening. It doesn't explain this 24-hour blackout of the exact skill I use to make a living, or a morning where I woke up almost like a stranger to myself. That's something getting switched off, not turned down. Now, regardless of the biology, and I'm not sure if I've ever said this on a podcast or heard it on a podcast, but alcohol also cut that cord that I have developed and honed to source, to spirit, whatever you want to call the thing under the thing, intuition, a felt sense, the line I stay plugged into so that I know what's going on, so I can read myself and know what I need. I had one drink and that line went dead. Now, I'm sure there's a joke here. Alcohol is literally called spirits. The alchemists believe that distilling something down to its purest form pulled out its actual spirit. Meanwhile, I'm one glass in and cut off from mine entirely. That's probably not a coincidence. Anyway, GABA doesn't account for that part. It doesn't explain a felt sense of disconnection from something that is like my leg has been cut off. It's my lifeline. I don't need a study to back this up. It happened. I felt it happen, and I'm not going to pretend I need permission to call it what it is. But that next morning, the biology behind the anxiety, that's better documented. Because your body doesn't just bounce back. It overcorrects. Your cortisol, which is your stress hormone we have talked about on this podcast before, will spike, which lights up the exact same pathways as anxiety. Add in a night of pretty sucky sleep, and you wake up anxious and worse equipped to deal with whatever's coming up. And then there's an anger version of this too. So you've probably heard the hormone serotonin. Happy hormone. It's also your anger diffuser. It drops within about 30 minutes of that first sip of alcohol. My husband actually clocked this in himself. He regularly drinks craft beer and noticed his fuse is shorter than it used to be, enough so that he's talking about maybe cutting back. Nothing about reaching for a drink means that something's wrong with you. What it means in my case is that my body caught something that most people's wouldn't. It noticed the interference, even at an amount everyone around me would call completely harmless, like one drink, come on. The research specifically on, say, sensitive or intuitive nervous systems and alcohol, non-existent. There's no research money in that. Mostly it's just personal accounts, not clinical studies. The biology does back up part of my story, but my own body backs up the rest. Now, this is exactly the kind of thing I work through with people inside my membership, the Intuitive Circle. We're not talking about should I drink or not. That's not my lane. What I'm actually interested in is what happens in your body when something external interferes with your signal. What does go quiet in your body? And then what gets really loud, maybe as a rebound the next morning? And what's actually running underneath both of those mechanisms? My circle is on summer pause right now, but the waitlist is open at leslieturner.ca/the Intuitive Circle. If you want first access when it reopens in September, please add your name to the list. So alcohol is the only substance where not using it is the thing that needs explaining. Nobody asks why you're skipping, I'm going to call it a line at a party. You know what I mean by that. But someone will always ask why you're not drinking. And that question comes preloaded with its own guesses. You're either pregnant or you're in recovery or something's wrong with you. Because I just don't feel like it anymore isn't usually an acceptable answer. No, I grew up in a really small town with a very real drinking culture problem. We went to bush parties very young. I think my first drink was actually peach schnapps and orange juice. Before I was old enough to know better. I think we quickly switched to Smirnoff Ice after that. So this isn't me making alcohol the villain of this story, but it's also not me pretending it doesn't actually do anything. What I am noticing, and I hear from more of the women in my circles every month, is a shift Fewer women reaching for the glass of wine to close out the day. Less resonance with that, mummy wine culture. Or the whole bit where exhaustion and a bottle of something gets sold to us as self-care. It's not always sobriety in the recovery sense. A lot of the time, it's just not landing the way it used to. And that's allowed to be true without anyone needing to diagnose or justify it. So I'm not telling you this to tell you to stop drinking. That's not what this episode is about. I had one drink twice in about 5 years. That's it. That's the whole scope of it. It's hardly a cautionary tale. What I'm telling you is pay attention to what goes quiet. So for me, it was intuition. The read that I trust with my clients, with my son, with my partner, with myself. And for you, it might be something else. Your ability to actually feel what you feel. That somatic signal in your body that tells you the truth before your brain has a chance to talk you out of it. That sense of knowing is such a superpower. Cutting ourselves off from it, from our emotions, our body, our own intuition, isn't neutral. It costs us. Whatever that thing is that you rely on to actually know what's true for you, watch what makes it go quiet. And then watch what it costs you the next day when it comes back online loud all at once in the form of maybe insecurity you thought you'd already worked through. This isn't about fixing the trigger. This is noticing what the trigger reveals. This is what emotional numbing actually looks like from the inside. It's not necessarily a dramatic blackout, just the line going quiet in a way you didn't even register happening. That glass of wine didn't create the insecurity about my money or my body. It just turned the volume up on something that was already there all the time. But I don't usually feel it at full volume because I've built a life where I can regulate it before it gets loud. And one glass of wine took that regulation away for 12 to 24 hours. That's what showed me how much regulating I actually do every single day without really noticing it. Now, I do want to slow down here for a second because the word numbing gets used very loosely, and so it stops meaning anything. Let me tell you what it actually felt like in my body both times. The first time, so that glass of whiskey, that little gremlin we all have in our brain took over. I was grumpy, I was dysregulated, my body wanted to sleep, I needed space and quiet, and instead I was surrounded by people that I love, like it was my family, and I felt so disconnected. I was not present, even while I was sitting right there in the living room. Now, the second time, the wine, it was different. I woke up in the morning, I did pick up my phone the next day, and which is kind of typical for me, so it's not really a symptom of anything, but there was a numbing aspect to that. There was almost a slow spiral with, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel this level of anxiety, and it went into more of a darker place. We were at this gorgeous spa, and I couldn't enjoy it. Everything was triggering, the insecurities. So, I couldn't relax. My body felt braced the whole time. And I actually caught it that day. And I had to have a conversation with my husband that ended up in me crying and saying out loud what was actually going on and being very vulnerable. And anyway, it was a lot. And that gap, the stress between waking up already spiraling and being able to say out loud what was going on, that's the cost of numbing. You're not enjoying where you actually are. You're not present with what you're feeling. It's a delay. So try this. The next time you reach for something, whether it's a drink, your phone, a second episode of something you're not even watching, or a task that doesn't actually need doing right now, I want you to pause for 3 seconds before you do it. Now, this isn't to stop the action. It's just to notice what you're turning down the volume on if you went through with it. Some of the time you won't actually realize, and that's fine. But the noticing, that 3 seconds of noticing is the entire practice. The knowing why kind of comes later. Now, I don't know if I will ever have that glass of wine again. I don't even think that's an interesting question. The interesting question is the one that I'm going to keep sitting with. How much am I muting on purpose or by accident just to get through the average day? And what would it feel like to not need to? Alcohol is kind of the most obvious version of this. It's not the only one, though. Scrolling your phone until your eyes glaze over, you're muting. That's a mute button. Overthinking something until you can't feel it anymore, mute button. Overworking, overexercising, staying too busy to ever sit still long enough for the signal to come through, mute buttons. I'm noticing it in clients, I'm noticing it in myself, and I'm not interested in the tidy answer for it. I think this is something we have to figure out loud as we go. So consider this your open invitation. Notice your own mute button this week. That's the whole assignment. I want to thank you for being here. If you're here and listening, you're already doing this work. We'll see you next week. If this episode landed somewhere, don't just let it sit there. That feeling you have right now, that's not a coincidence. That's your nervous system telling you something is ready to move. The Intuitive Circle is my membership where we stop talking about it and actually do something about it. Twice a month, live with me, body-based, real-time, and specific to what's actually running for you. Doors open back up in September, and the waitlist is open now at leslieturner.ca/The Intuitive Circle. Go put your name on the list. And if this was the episode that made you pull over and think, wait, is she talking about me? Please subscribe, leave a review, and send it to the woman in your life who needs to hear it. You know exactly who I'm talking about. Find me on Instagram at @TheLeslieTurner. Until next time, the fact that you're here and listening means you're already doing this work.